I'm Daisy.
And I'm Terry.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 138.
And this week, it's Daisy's turn to share something with us. Daisy, what do you have?
Well, Terry, this will please whoever was talking to you about this being their favourite book of the year, because we are back again with Daniel H. Pink. I like it when people like to put their initials in their name. He is Daniel H. Pink. And this is a continuation of the previous episode I recorded with you, almost. It's a continuation along the regrets theme. And this is an article I came across probably when I was doing some research from the previous one, or maybe it was a newsletter or something like that. As I said before, I really should make a note of where these things come to me when they come to me, because it just evacuates my brain and I've forgotten. But the article he wrote is called "What Can We Learn from the Solace of At Least and the Sting of If Onlys?" And I don't know about you, but I'm one of these people who tends towards, if only. So I thought, well, this could be interesting. So as I said, it's a follow-on from my last episode, which was number 136, which was talking about his book called The Power of Regret. And if you remember, he identifies 4 core regrets: foundational, boldness, moral, and regrets of connection, or lack of, I suppose you could say. And then we went on to talk a little bit about this idea of writing an email to your present self from your future self, asking what your regrets would be for each of these categories. And they had a suggested template so that you can learn from them and adjust your behavior accordingly, head them off at the pass, I guess, and reduce the impact of that future regret, maybe. We both talked about how we would probably need to individualize and adjust that template a bit, because we both felt a little bit judged by it. But this article caught my eye because it feels like the epitome of regret to me, that phrase, if only. Oh, just those words tend to make me feel a little bit anxious. It also reminded me of something you said in one of the edits that I've done of you recently, where you were saying that people should on themselves, which made me chuckle a bit. So it reminded me of that too. So Daniel sets the scene talking about an Olympic cycling race. I won't go into the details, but he talks about it being a difficult race and how the woman who was predicted to win and get a gold medal actually came second with a silver medal. She just lost her lead at the last minute. He then goes on to show us photos of each of the medal winners in turn, looking at the faces of these women who'd won their medals standing on the podium after they'd got their medals. And he showed them to us in the order of gold, silver, bronze. And as you'd expect, it went from pleased to sort of more and more disappointed. But he then reveals that he was fibbing to us, and he shows us the podium pic. And actually what he'd done was swap around the silver and the bronze, so they don't have that look of sort of degrees of disappointment in the order that you might expect. It's actually the silver medal winner who is looking the most dejected out of the 3. And what this illustrates, he says, is a phenomenon, that's one of those difficult words to say, isn't it? Phenomenon identified by behavioural scientists more than 25 years ago, called counterfactual thinking, which he describes as the human ability to mentally travel through time and conjure incidents and outcomes that never actually happened. We can concoct events that run counter to the actual facts, so counterfactual. Thoughts about the past that make us feel better are far less common than those that make us feel worse. Counterfactuals allow us to imagine what might have been. And this is the crucial part. We tend to go one of two ways with these counterfactuals. We can have downward counterfactuals, and this is when we think about how the alternative outcome could have been worse. And this will prompt us to say something like, at least. For example, sure, I got a C in my exam, but at least I didn't fail. Now I won't have to retake the exam. And he calls these people the at leasts. The other direction you could have gone, surprisingly enough, is upward counterfactuals. And when we move in this direction, we imagine how things could have gone better. And these are the if only. If only I'd revised more, I might have got a better grade. And so he calls these the if onlys. He goes on to refer to a whole load of studies looking at athletes and analysing these podium photographs, and over again, it's the silver medalists who look the most disappointed. So at leasts make us feel better, and if onlys make us feel worse. So you would think then that we would favour the at least direction. But of course, the truth is that we tend to veer towards the if only, the upward counterfactual. And one study that he mentions suggests that the ratio between the two is 80%. So 80% of a group studied went with if only rather than at least. And this was a study where they pinged people randomly to ask what was on their mind at the time. If only counterfactuals degrade our feelings now. But Daniel H. Pink maintains that this is the key because they can improve our lives later. And this is a direct quote from him. Regret is the quintessential upward counterfactual, the ultimate if only. Its purpose is to make us feel worse because by making us feel worse today, regret helps us do better tomorrow. So you can see this is really a continuation of what we were talking about before, but I really like this honing in on if only versus at least. And I felt a little bit conflicted again reading this. It felt to me like the article could go in one of two ways, or you could interpret it in one of two ways, feel about it in one of two ways. Clearly, Daniel H. Pink, veers down the we should embrace regrets route because, that's what his book's about and that's how he works with people. But another obvious route, or the other obvious main route, at least to me, is to try and foster more of an at least approach than an if only approach. Or maybe it's a bit of both. Or maybe I'm one of these people who is a bit too focused on the how I'm feeling in the here and now. I don't know. So this is sort of open to discussion. What do you think? I wonder if it might be a case of one is better in one circumstance, one is better in another. I suppose I was thinking where it would be maybe better to foster more of an at least rather than an if only approach was when you get stuck in one of those rumination cycles, thinking about something in the past that you regret. Although maybe we should be taking his approach and learning from that regret. I don't know. So I'm really interested to hear what you think about it.
Well, Daisy, to me, this opens up a whole kind of question mark about how we look at concepts like this, how we experience them, and how we measure them and test them. Because clearly I have no research that he has. He has all of this research that shows this and shows this. I'm a firm believer, and I remember when I was going through grad school, I really got bogged down sometimes by research because it's, in my mind, it's so biased based on which words you use, how you ask the question. Is it self-report? Is it observational? All of these kind of confounding factors. And I know researchers have to take that all into consideration, but still, if we look at this and say, well, in this research, they found people who do if-onlys experience this, and people who do at least experience this, I'm always the one that says, yeah, but what about when? Because even when I'm taking tests, like I've had to take the Myers-Briggs, the MMPI, like hundreds of times. And every time it's like, do I like plants better than I like that? Well, last Tuesday, I really liked those plants, but do I owe it? You know, and I just get caught up on all the details.
Yeah, and you can quite often see how, well, sometimes there's an argument for me ticking that box, but there's also a good argument for me ticking that box. I do realise, actually, that I failed to mention the reason why he was talking about the gold, silver medal winners on the podium. And I'm sure most people have figured it out, but his reasoning behind it was that the silver is sort of one step away, whereas the bronze is enough of a distance away from getting the gold to fall into the, well, at least I got a medal, whereas the silver's that bit too close. If only I'd done such and such, I could have got the gold. So that's why the reasoning anyway, that the silver medalists tend to look the most disappointed.
I wish I had a different analogy for this that wasn't so tied to my current work, but it's the one that is so present for me, so I'm going to share it. What this reminds me of is the individual differences on the same behavior, and that same behavior can mean something to some people and something completely different to others, and that is weighing yourself. So in my community, there's almost always a debate. Should I weigh myself? And if I do, how often?
Should we throw away those scales because they lie to us? Or
That's right. But other people are like, nope, I weigh every day. And other people, I never weigh, or I weigh once a week or once a month. And I don't think there's one right answer for anyone. And so when I heard you say, I'm not sure which one of these is better, does one fit better in certain situations? I think it depends a lot on what the person thinking it and experiencing it, how they make sense of it. So for example, I hear some people, when they say at least, it becomes a way of justifying. So let's say, for example, we'll use your example. I'm in a class and I got a grade that wasn't really the grade I wanted. And I say, well, at least I didn't fail. For many of us, that is justification to not do any more ever again. Like, hey, look, you can pass. Now, if you're super motivated to do better, at least might be motivating for you. But if you're kind of wiping your brow like, whew, at least I passed, I don't think it's going to promote different behavior next time. So going back to what you said about the if only, there's real potential for some people that this will motivate different behavior, because you'll feel crappy about the results right now, but you'll realize there was something else I could do and I'll do it. And I'm going to use another analogy or a personal example for this one. When I was a middle school teacher, I felt very defeated by always kind of being told the message of education is horrible. Educators are horrible. Teachers don't work hard enough. Teachers have too much time off. Teachers are too well paid. Kids need to learn this, whatever. It was just like constantly a barrage of what you're doing isn't good enough. And I carried that with me in a very defeated way. I felt like I was basically being told, you're not good enough. You're not doing your job well enough. You're the reason this country is going down the drain. That's how I experienced it. And I left teaching, and I had some conversations with some other teachers about this. And one of my friends, who was also a teacher, said, yeah, but doesn't hearing that make you want to work harder and show them that blah, blah, blah? And I said, no. So I think anytime we look at concepts like this, it often has more to do with the individual of which one is going to be more helpful or more damaging.
Yeah.
For me, getting those messages was very damaging. It made me feel so defeated. I didn't want to try at all. And for my friend, it drove her and motivated her. And she eventually retired. And I think she kept that passion for teaching throughout her whole career. Whereas for me, I was going to say it pushed me out of the career, but obviously I chose that. But I did not like feeling like that and couldn't imagine doing that year after year. Whereas for someone else, that was super motivating. So I love his concepts. And unfortunately, I think either one, depending on the individual differences, could be defeating or could be motivating.
Yes, that's very interesting. And I wonder if sometimes a time element, when I mentioned that, you don't want to get into that rumination cycle on things. And I sometimes feel if it's too far in the past where you've got to the point where you can't do anything about it, or you're sort of too far past the point where, I suppose even he would still argue that there's something to be learnt from that moving forward. But I think certainly when it taps into the suggestion from last time about sending this email to yourself and focusing more on the short-term nature of regrets, when to me that feels like it has so much more potential for change without it being quite as challenging. But yes, when you talked about that, it not sort of being a driving force, a motivation to work harder with exam results, I can certainly remember thinking that with some of the grades where I passed, especially with subjects that I wasn't as interested in, that I got a C in. Well, at least I passed. That's okay. I passed. It's fine. But with the subjects that I wanted to go on to study at A-level, I would have been much more disappointed with lower grades. Mm-hmm. I would have felt more defeated by that because it was something that I wanted to carry on into my future. Whereas the other grades for me were like, once they're done, as long as I pass, doesn't really matter. They have no place in my future. So even with the same example, you can think about things in different ways and they can have a different impact on you.
Absolutely.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? And it really goes back to that individualization, but then also with yourself and with examples for yourself, there's probably some tailoring and individualization that needs to go on, and some self-awareness mm-hmm. about whether you might be using the at leasts to justify not working harder as an example, or on the other end of the scale, make sure that you're not using if onlys to get into a negative sort of rumination cycle, and maybe switching a little bit more your perspective to at least with some things mm-hmm. might be a bit more helpful for your way of thinking.
It also reminds me of a concept, and I'm not positive, but I think I got this from Kelly McGonigal's book, The Upside of Stress. I read that book around the time I was reading several other books about positive benefits of stress, but I think it was from hers. It talked about the idea that when something doesn't go as you want it to, or, you fail at something, how you ask the question could be really important. And the encouragement was to ask, how did this happen? Not why did this happen? Mm. Because generally, if we're asking why,
it's on us.
Our answers are self-deprecating. Yes, you were too lazy. You're not smart enough. It's really negative. Versus, how did this happen? Well, the week prior to the exam, there were 3 nights that I didn't study because I was working, and I went into it not feeling fully prepared. That's not tied to a bunch of, negative feelings and negative meanings about ourselves. That is identifying, there are some contributing factors that I could control differently next time. Versus, I'm lazy, not smart enough, I'm not good at math or whatever. That's a very different way of looking at why did this happen. So I think just even that fits for me in this example of maybe what questions we ask ourselves or how we think about the what if or the if only. If we think about, oh, if only I had done that, how will I do that in the future? How is that possible for me? How could I change this outcome? Rather than just stop with the if only or the at least. If we stop there, we might be playing into some of those negative things that don't help us improve or change the outcome next time. So it's an interesting topic. I just realized as I was listening to you, it brings up all of my discomfort with social science kind of research. And here's the theory and here's why it works. Yeah, but how about how it fits here? Oh, well, that's not what we studied. It's complicated.
I think that's brilliant, though. I think that's a brilliant insight, and it feels to me like a key component that's missing. And I think it also explains the conflicting feeling, for me anyway, it explains the conflicting feelings I have about it. It explains both our reactions, which were very similar, about feeling a little bit judged, because there is that massive difference. And that's, to me, why it feels like a key component that needs to be in there, is that it's really important how you approach it, how you ask the question, because your defenses don't go up. So yes, if you're approaching it from how have things happened, then you can tap into this whole system that he's got going of regret and how we can learn from it, because you've got that slight detachment that means it doesn't feel like it's a part of you. So so you're not talking about, if only I was a different person, if only. But if only, yes, I'd set things up a little bit differently. I'd thought a bit more about it. If only I'd, was getting into this system of emails and had a slightly different mindset about it and had been a bit more forward thinking, I might have been able to change that outcome a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it's focusing on your actions rather than you and who you are. So yes, I think maybe he's missed the trick there. Although maybe that's part of the book. We should ask the person you were discussing it with. Maybe she can enlighten us. But sometimes I think, I suppose it's a bit like with research. They get a little bit blinkered into their theories. I can't remember who it was. Who is the 54321 person?
Mel Robbins?
Yes, if you remember, I'm not sure if it was the 54321 or if it was the other system that she came up with that we talked about. But and I can't for the life of me remember what the add-on or sort of follow-up component bit was that I added, but we both decided it worked better with that sort of add-on than just as it was before. So yes, I think sometimes it works well to blend some of these things together, and it takes people like you to connect the dots. So there you go. Thank you very much. I knew you'd have some valuable insight.
Well, I hope that everyone can take both of these episodes, kind of looking back at 136 and this one, and see, how does this work for them? How can they use this to their benefit? Not getting bogged down in it. Just like I said, with my whole teaching example, for me, that was so defeating that I couldn't see my way around it. I wish I'd known some of these kinds of things so I could try to look at it differently and see the other side of it. So I hope that people are able to do that. And I hope that you have a great week, Daisy.
You too, Terry. Have a very wonderful week.